Alright, welcome to this video. This one is going to be on coal. We're continuing our non-renewable resources. So look for nuclear power to be the next one in this little series. But coal is the most abundant fossil fuel. It is found pretty commonly throughout the world, and we've been using it for a long time, since well into the 1800s at least. And so this is the formation process of coal. Essentially, you've got this ancient forest, woody plant material, dies and doesn't decompose fast enough, and it gets covered up with sediments, and eventually over time the sediments build up and up and up and up and up, and so you get a lot of heat and pressure from it. It's really starting to squeeze, kind of like a sponge that you're squeezing and drying itself out. And so it's a process that takes about 300 to 400 million different years. But one thing that's important to know is there's kind of different stages of coal that we use, and so you can see them just kind of barely along the bottom here, but we'll get into what they are. And so these are the 4 stages of coal. Peat, this is the earliest stage. You may see this being used a little bit in Europe, like Ireland and Scotland have some peat sources, and so they might use it for heating their homes or something. But very low heat content in peat. It's usually very, very moist and wet of a substance. But eventually, over time, it'll get squeezed, and that'll eventually turn into lignite, which is known as brown coal. Brown coal also has a very low heat content. There's not a really large amount of lignite around, and so it's not one we're going to focus too much on. The 2 main types of coal are bituminous and anthracite coal. Bituminous is the earlier stage. It's what's known as soft coal. It still has moisture in it, and because of that, there's still a lot of sulfur containing compounds in here. And so this is very, very dirty coal. When we burn it, sulfur is one of the biggest pollutants that it makes, and this type of coal has an awful lot of sulfur in it. Anthracite is known as hard coal, and this one also has a very high heat content. So these are both very effective to be used as fuel. This one has very lower sulfur content. It's not as common because it has to age even further from bituminous to become anthracite. Our coal supply is estimated to run anywhere from 214 to 1,000 years. So there's a lot of coal. Not all of that is anthracite coal, of course, so we do need to be careful where we're getting it from. Nice thing is we are really up there in terms of coal resources. We have a lot of it. We've used a lot of it, but there's still a lot of it remaining in the United States. It's also one of the most widely used. 42% of the world's electricity comes from coal, and so that's used for everything from heating and operating your house to a lot of these industrial purposes like making steel and cement and building materials. This is the coal powered plant, and this is what you'd expect to see if you went up to JEA across the river. And so the JEA plant, the coal is going to enter into a boiler. The boiler has the stack on top, and so if you look over across the river to the Dames Point coal plant, you'll see one very skinny tower. This is the stack, and so that's where the pollutants like the sulfur and the carbon dioxide are coming out. Inside the boiler, you've got water coming straight out of the river that gets heated, and as it gets heated, it's going to go in to spin this turbine, and as the turbine spins, it powers the generator, which transmits electricity through the transformer and out to the transmission lines. After the turbine, we of course need to cool that steam in a condenser. You might see that run through the cooling tower, which would be that giant concrete structure, which you also see stuff coming out of. That stuff's just water vapor. It's not harmless to anybody or anything. And then they can recycle some of that water. They'll also be pumping water out of the river, the St. Johns River, to keep that cooling tower water very cool, and likewise to keep that water in the system very cool, so it can get used up again. Coal is known as the dirtiest fossil fuel. It's in rock form, and so these little rocks of coal are going to contain a lot of nasty stuff. Sulfur is a big one in terms of air pollution, but you also have mercury, arsenic, and trace metals that get released when it burns. After you burn it too, you're left with coal ash, which is another toxic substance, mostly because it contains a lot of mercury and arsenic in it as well. Sulfur becomes sulfur dioxide, and we haven't talked about air pollution yet, but this is a major air pollutant. It causes a lot of problem with acid rain and smog, photochemical smog, so we'll talk about more what that means to be an air pollutant in the next unit. It also produces soot. Soot, especially when mining, can accumulate in the lungs, and you get these trace amounts of metals that can't be removed from it, from the coal itself. And so when you burn it, you release a lot of these out into the atmosphere, like mercury and arsenic, which can build up in animals, especially top of the food chain animals, including people. Coal ash is also very toxic because of having arsenic and mercury in it. We can use some of that for making cinder blocks and things, but it does have dangerous levels of toxic metals, so we have to be careful where we put it, that it's not going to be consumed, breathed in, or eaten by anybody. There's a lot of kind of propaganda out on both sides, and coming from Pennsylvania, I've seen a lot of these billboards firsthand, kind of laughable almost, where you get increasingly green and always red, white, and blue, affordable coal energy. And so you can see this is from Pennsylvania, which a huge part of our economy in PA relies on coal. And so they run these campaigns to try to convince people that, oh, the wind you can't rely on because the wind will die and the sun sets, but coal is so strong it'll be there forever. So I thought they're kind of interesting to put in, and it's a pretty big propaganda machine to push this clean coal initiative, which you've probably heard that phrase before. There is no such thing as clean coal, of course. It's all going to produce carbon dioxide. It's all going to produce sulfur dioxide, and those toxic metals can't be taken out of it. So even if you're using anthracite coal, you're still releasing a lot of air pollutants. You also have the other side, and so I think this is a good example that you can get someone that is a little too crazy about either side of the issues. And so we've got our protesters, coal is dirty, you've got only God should move mountains. This is, I believe, in Tennessee, where they're trying to stop mountaintop removal. You can see just how devastating this mountaintop removal process was here. In reality, there's no such thing as clean coal. And so they're relating it to aliens and Bigfoot here. So you got both sides of the issue. Clean coal does not exist, but as of right now, we don't have any good alternatives to using it for our energy. It's much cheaper than any of the renewable sources, and we've got the infrastructure for using it. And so it would be a significant investment to make any kind of immediate shift, more of a long-term thing that we're looking for. It's great, and it's also great when we can increase the efficiency of coal mining and how we generate the energy in the power plants, but there is no way, it's important to remember that there is no way to reduce the CO2 and other pollutants completely. We can reduce them, we can filter the air that's coming out of the coal plants to extract sulfur dioxide and those heavy metals, but we're never going to get them all out. Another thing we can do with coal is we can put it through a process called coal gasification, and so essentially you're taking the solid rock form of coal and it's going through a conversion process to turn it into liquid fuel for vehicle transportation use. This is going to have a very low ERI, energy return on energy invested, compared to the solid form of coal for heat purposes, but it does have a higher energy content to it. By doing coal gasification, we also can completely control how much sulfur and toxic metals there are before we burn it. So you can see why it's not widely used, because you're going to spend a little more to make a little less in terms of the coal companies producing this. But on the flip side, it becomes a little more useful. We can put it into our vehicles as plain old gasoline, essentially, and we can take out or control the levels of this bad stuff, the sulfur and the toxic metals. And that's where we're going to stop for coal. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please bring notes and be prepared to discuss tomorrow.